in the judge's chambers, and the judge and his secretary just like they just turned red and left, you know. And I took them off and I put them on the desk.
On the judge's desk?
Right, and I was sitting there in my underwears, you know. And they came in and they just tried to explain to me their situation. I understood their situation, but they didn't understand mine.
Well, they tried to say, pay us even $5 on that, and we'll give you your registration. He said, I'm not paying a penny. I shouldn't have to pay parking tickets. Yeah. So finally they came in, they said, okay, you can have your registration. The parking tickets stay. He wanted all the parking tickets removed. Yeah. I weakened, and I said, let's do it, Michael. So everybody's talking to him and saying, this is your best deal. You're not going to get another deal like this. So finally, we left with the registration at about 4:30. All the offices were closed. The place was deserted. And we're wheeling him out in an office chair because he couldn't put his legs on. And after that, they removed, well, that day they removed the parking tickets down from 7,000 to 1,000. And then in subsequent talks with them, they removed it down. I think it's now down to $75, all those tickets.
That's a great victory.
And next year, we'll get it down to nothing.
Down to 75, yeah.
I had a lady at the parking violations. I told her, I said, look, I'm a Vietnam veteran, this and that. And she said, unfortunately, you were in a war that nobody really cared about. Now,
she said that?
She said that to me. Not that it didn't really bother me, but
so that
but keep it to yourself, lady.
Yeah.
You know.
I was hitchhiking back from Philly Naval Hospital, and I had a cane and my uniform on, and I had my braces on. I had some brace on my arm and all. And a van went past me, and then they stopped about 20 feet past me to pick me up, and I ran up to the van, and just as I got up to the front of the van, they threw all over my uniform. They had Coca-Cola and ketchup and whatever. They threw it all over me and pulled away.
I think I have a silent sense of rage, the need to scream at everyone and tell them, wake up. They're home, they're here, they love, they cry, they feel. They're in pain, and why doesn't anyone care?
The first time that I went outside of a hospital, and it was a business day in the middle of the week, and I'll never forget how stunned I was. And I felt like just shouting, wait a minute. It's business as usual. Everybody's going about their jobs. Don't you understand there's a war going on?
1, 2, This is Bob Mueller at the Republican Party convention in Miami Beach, 1972. We don't want your fucking war! 1, 2, 3, 4. We don't want your fucking war! 1, 2, 3, 4. We don't want your fucking war! 1, 2, 3, 4. We don't want your fucking war!
We feel that it's our patriotic duty to stop this war as Vietnam veterans we served over there. So we're going to read this statement to President Richard M. Nixon. We have fought in your war and lost. We have been maimed and crippled for the rest of our lives. We have lost many of our brothers in this war. We have killed men, women, and children. Every day we ask why. We cannot live with this. Now is the time for all good presidents to come to the aid of his men. 4 years ago, you ran on a peace platform. 4 years have passed, and this corrupt and immoral war still goes on. You have lied to your country.
We now strip ourselves of those medals for courage and heroism, those decorations for wounds we suffered. We cast these away as symbols of dishonor, shame, and inhumanity, and dedicate ourselves now to the peace and brotherhood this nation once held as its heritage.
There was much shallowness and rhetoric then, but the view of authority, the so-called consensus, against which all other opinions are measured as biased or politically tainted, was challenged as never before, both by those who fought and those who did not. For many people in America and Britain, that was the true meaning of the Vietnam years. An alternative to corrupt power and war was seen as practical as it was idealistic. People who went to prison for a principle were no longer eccentrics, but genuine moral heroes. So too were those soldiers I knew who deserted not out of fear but in disgust, who refused orders and fired intentionally over the heads of an enemy they respected more than their own. But where is that moral outrage now? Oh yes, Bob Mueller in his wheelchair was briefly fashionable. Indeed, he was invited to meet Henry Kissinger and the big names in oil and banking and war. David Packard, one of the richest men in armaments, told him, "Bob, we're going to help you veterans."
It's almost a year to the day since I had that meeting. I've written him no less than 5 times. I've called his office no less than 10 times. And I have never gotten even the courtesy of a reply or a return phone call. Total, absolute silence.
And he promised to help.
He promised to help. But for a guy like that, who was Undersecretary of Defense in the Vietnam War, who was one of the 10 richest individuals in the country, who made his money on defense contracts, and who today is still in the papers all the time talking about the need for a stronger national defense in this country, to absolutely reject any accountability, responsibility, or anything for that generation of soldiers that he was a principal part in sending off to war is, to me, beyond belief.
President Carter, when he first came into office, February 1977, he promised in his first fireside chat,
the top priority in our job training programs will go to young veterans of the Vietnam War. Unemployment is much higher among veterans than among others of the same age who did not serve in the military.
And what's happened?
They've been dismal failures.
Do you say you're a veteran when you go for a job?
I did it one time. Now I try to delete that part of my life because I think that it works against me to say that I was a veteran in Vietnam.
The first time Bob Mueller was invited to the White House, President Carter did not appear. His media manager later described it as a no-vote situation.
Last year, they had National Vietnam Veterans Week, and I think it was about 400 who were invited to the White House. And one young man, I think, summed it up, and he said, "We're just getting lemonade and sandwiches. The POWs got a big dinner."
What did the president say to you?
We love you. That's what he said.
In August 1980, during the presidential election campaign, Ronald Reagan said this: "To me, it's the height of hypocrisy for the Carter administration to repeatedly tell us how much we owe our Vietnam veterans and then recommend a stingy 10% increase in the GI Bill. We have been shabby in our treatment of those who return. They deserve our gratitude, our respect, and our continuing concern. Our war was a noble cause." In March 1981, President Reagan asked Congress to cut programs specially designed to help Vietnam veterans find jobs, finish their education, and be treated for drug addiction and alcoholism. A few years ago, after long struggle, 91 veterans counseling centers were established in the poorest parts of cities and towns, where most Vietnam veterans live. They've become a small salvation for those for whom the noble cause remains a nightmare. Mr. Reagan wants them all closed down.
They want America to open up their arms and say, "Don't go away. Tell me about your pain." Bobby's never talked to me. I think the most he has said was, I think, in October of last year when you saw the Life magazine. There was a Life magazine article on, I think it was six men who were photographed 10 years ago, and they were photographed again in '79. And we were looking at the photographs. We were in a football field, and Bobby just started to cry, and I didn't understand why. And he said, "Virginia, just look at their eyes. The pain is still there, the horror. They're 10 years older, but the pain is still brand new." I didn't know what to do, so I just let him cry, because that was the first time I had seen the pain.
The only reason I believe we've had success in organizing the Vietnam veteran is because of one issue, and that's the chemical that was used in Vietnam to knock out the jungles. And that we can finally say to every single guy that served in Vietnam, "Hey, listen, you better pay attention to what we have to say, because your life might well depend